Well, hello. Welcome to BizStream Academy again. So we're gonna go ahead and kick it right off. Well, you guys already have got your glitch environment already set up, and we're ready to really dig into some code. So before we do that, we've got a couple of things we need to go over here, and just get familiar with a little bit. So the beginning is going to be maybe a little bit slower than some of the other parts. But I promise we will get through it. So the first thing we're going to start with is, what is HTML? So you may have heard of HTML before. Maybe you knew what it is, maybe you don't. It doesn't really matter. But what it stands for is Hypertext Markup Language. You have to remember that because it's going to be on the test at the end. Actually, it's really not important that you remember it at all. I forget what it stands for all the time. But if you know the term HTML, that's the important thing. But what it is, it's the programming language that every single website you've ever been to, it's what they use to make a web page, or we call render a web page. That's when that web page actually shows up on the screen. We call it rendering. It reads the tags, which we'll get into that here in a little bit. It reads the tags and interprets it, and so it turns it into content for you to take in, and whether that's Amazon.com or TikTok. It doesn't really matter, right? It's the same thing. It consists of tags, like we said. It's enclosed in the little angle brackets, which are known as elements. We'll get into some of these terms here in a little bit deeper, so you guys can understand them. And they usually come in pairs, with a beginning, an end, and we also use CSS to style it, which we'll get into in a few slides here. But we're going to start with just the basic structure, okay? So if a website is like a house, our HTML is the frame of the house. It's the studs and the trusses that form the roof and that sort of thing. It's the framework that gives it shape and that gives it sort of meaning. It separates one room for another. So I do want to show you here. This says tip, use the view source option when viewing any web page. Now this was something that was like, it blew my mind the first time I saw it, and maybe I'm just easily impressed. But let me show you what I mean here. So let me find my other monitor. So this is Wikipedia. If you've ever written a paper before, you've probably spent a lot of time on this site. It's just a regular website. There's nothing really fancy going on here. But if we right click anywhere in empty space, we get this menu, which you've probably seen before, but you may not have really paid attention to this one right here. View page source. And what that means is I want to view the source code for this page. So if I click on this, it's going to open me up in a new tab. And what I see is the HTML code for the main page of Wikipedia. This is exactly what it looks like. And I'll scroll through, and it can look really, really intimidating. There is a lot of stuff here. And believe me, even me doing this every day of my life for a living, it can look a little intimidating. If we go all the way to the bottom, just the main page has about 600 lines of code on it. What I want you to remember is that a website is not built 600 lines at a time. It's built one line of code at a time. And by the time you're done adding little tiny bits and pieces, it can add up pretty quick. But all this code is HTML code, and you can see it has shape and it has structure, and there's different tags. Like this says div, and this says nav and h3, and we don't know what any of that means yet. But we'll get there. So this is a pretty cool thing. So if you ever get curious about, like, you see something on a site and you're interested in, like, hey, how did they do that? You can see the structure of it right here. So let's go back to our slides real quick. And let's go on to the next one here. So let's talk about what the anatomy of an HTML element looks like. All right, so let's define our terms, because I'm going to throw these terms around a lot, and I want to make sure you understand them. All right, so we have an element. That's the individual HTML component. A paragraph, a heading, a table, a link, a list, a div, so on and so forth. Those are all elements of HTML. It's an individual little piece of what's on a website. And then we have the term tag. Tag is very similar, but what it does is it marks the beginning and the end of an element. So we have an opening tag and a closing tag, and they contain characters that indicate the tag's purpose. So we have an example here where we just have a fake HTML tag name, right? We just made it up. It doesn't really exist in real life. But we have our opening tag and our closing tag. And you'll notice a little bit of difference between the two, right? The opening tag is just the angle brackets with the tag name inside of it. The closing tag is the same thing, but it has this little slash right there. It's very subtle, but that is the difference between an opening tag and a closing tag, and you'll get used to that pattern. So we put this entire thing together here. That is the element. So this is a tag that I use all the time, is a P tag or a paragraph tag. So if I had a paragraph of text, then I would write an element just like this. I would have my open P tag, I would write my text inside of it, and then I would have my close P tag. Okay, so let's keep going. We have a couple different types of elements. Okay, we have an element that can contain other elements or content. That's called a container tag. The name is pretty self-explanatory if you think about it. It contains things. It has stuff inside of it, right? There's nothing too mind-bending about that. And you'll see kind of what we mean if we flip black aside. These would both be container elements. Why? Well, they've got stuff inside of it, right? It's not just the tag by itself, right? It's got stuff inside. There are also some things that are standalone elements. They don't need anything inside of them. They're good all by themselves. You can't put anything else in it. We'll get to this later in the course, but a good example of that would be an image. So when you see a picture on a website, usually that's an image tag. An image tag doesn't have an open and a close. It's just the tag, and it has a little attribute on it that tells the site where the image lives, what file it lives in, and it displays it. And your browser knows how to figure that out. So let's break it down. We kind of went over this a little bit, but I want you to make sure we're really clear on this, because this is what we're going to be writing most of the day, right? So we got to really understand it. It's the foundation. It's, again, if we compare it to the house, if you don't get the frame right, it really doesn't matter how nice of a paint job you do, or how good the drywalling is. The house is going to fall down, right? So let's take a look at it. So we have our left angle bracket or a less than sign. We have a character or characters. So this is a paragraph tag. It's represented by P. There's division tags, so little divisions of stuff. We call that a div, D-I-V, and there's a bazillion of them. We'll get into all that. So we have our character or characters. We have our right angle bracket or our greater than sign. And then we have our closing tag. Again, exactly the same except for this forward slash right here. So they always come in pairs. We'll always put them together. All right, so this one we're going to go through pretty quickly. This is the doc type. So this is the first thing on an HTML page. And what it does is it tells the browser, hey, what type of page is this? Now, 99.999% of the time, you're going to be dealing with an HTML page. Like we said, it powers every website. And that's all we're going to get into today. But it tells the browser which version of the markup language, because remember, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So we can indicate what version we want, and what that page is going to use. So we have doc type HTML. Now, this is the first time we run into something that's kind of really weird, okay? And even I would say this is a little weird, right? This little tag right here can be confusing, okay? And it's really easy to think like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna memorize this weird like doc type HTML exclamation point. It's like another freaking language. Well, it is another language, but let you in on a little trick. Programmers don't memorize anything. Well, let me backtrack that a little bit. We do, But what ends up happening is we memorize it after we've done it 7,000 times and screwed it up 6,000 of those times and had to look it up 5,000. And you kind of get used to it, right? That's why I kind of go over this so much here, is because, is this important for your site? Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. Do you have to memorize it and understand every little nuance of what it does? You don't need to start. Eventually, you may want to dig in and really understand what you're doing, but to start, we don't really need to. Just a couple little notes here. We're case insensitive, so your case, your uppercase, your lowercase. So we see some examples here. Doc type, all lowercase here. We call this camel cased. We call this crazy cased. It's not really a term. I just made it up. They're all valid. The website does not care. The last one's a little weird, yeah, but you can do whatever you want here. All right, so we're going along, and if you're following along, I should point this out here. If you're following along on your glitch setup here, you can see they've already provided all this for us, right? So it's not something that we have to type in manually, all character by character. It's already here. The structure's ready to go, so all we have to do is start coding. But you can see they put in that doc type HTML. All right, so we've got that container tag going in HTML. Everything's inside of that. It's the first thing you write right outside your doc type. Okay. Now we have head and body tags. All right, I used to have a picture here of a guy with a tattoo. He had a tattoo on his neck that said head was a closed tag and the body was an open tag. I thought it was funny. I don't know. You can look it up. But they contain kind of two separate things, right? So one you see and one you don't really see. So the head is the stuff that you don't really see. It contains the title of the page and meta information about the page, right? So you may know what meta means, or that could be a really strange new term for you. Meta is information about information. Okay, does that make sense? So if the information on the page is a Wikipedia article, right? I'm reading about dinosaurs or bananas, it doesn't really matter. Meta information would be things like the title of the page, right? What is the title of this page? It's information about the information I'm reading. Who wrote it? When was it written? That sort of stuff. That's the kind of thing that the head tag contains inside of it. It's not usually visible to the person, but it provides information to search engines. It also happens to be, if you've ever noticed your little tabs up here where you get the little titles, that's where that comes from. It's a title attribute in your meta tag. And then you have the body. That's really everything else. It contains the actual content. Everything else that's visible to the user is going to be inside the body tag. So if we flip over to our glitch project, you can see they already have that set up for us again, right? So we have our head tag. So this is all our head tag. And we have a few different things in here. We have some meta tags with a char set, and we have all this stuff. And this is like some weird lingo. Who knows what it means? This is something I can never remember. I always have to look it up. We're not worried about that right now. This stuff is important later on when you really start getting into this. For now, what I want you to really look at is this title tag that says hello, right? So if we take our glitch site here and we click the little kind of cool sunglasses, we can hit show, and we're going to say show in a new window. Why not, right? It'll load up and it'll show you exactly what the code you have will look like out on a site, right? And you can see our title tag here that said hello with an exclamation point shows up in the tag right here. So you can see that working. We'll get into the other stuff here in a sec, but I think that's pretty cool. So nesting. All elements nest inside one another, all right? So it's what happens when you put containing tags inside of other containing tags. And let me show you kind of what I mean here. All right, so here we have some nested boxes, right? They nest inside one another just like our HTML does. You've got the orange inside the red, inside the yellow, and so on and so forth, right? You'll notice that they all fit completely inside one another. And we do the same thing with our HTML. We don't want to open one tag or start the red box. then start the orange box, and then close the red box. You know, it gets really weird, right? So we want one tag completely inside of another one. Helps it keep nice and structured, and kind of keeps things from getting a little wacky and out of hand here. So for instance, we have our head tag, right? And completely inside of that, here's our opening head tag and our closing head tag. We have our title tag. It's completely nested inside of that. Now that can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, really as deep as you want to go. At some point, it gets a little crazy. It gets hard to manage, and you really want to make it easy on yourself. So we try to limit how deep we go, but ultimately the browser doesn't really care. All right, moving right along. So here's some examples, kind of what I just went over, where we've got, you know, a paragraph tag nested inside of the body tag. We've got a UL with an LI inside of it, and a P tag inside of that. We don't know what these are yet. That's fine. You don't need to know what they are. But can you recognize we have 3 opening tags here and 3 closing tags? And they don't mix up, right? We have open, 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 close, close, close. So the element, the paragraph, this is one of the most common ones you'll see on any website. So if you go ahead and you see this, I want to show you a couple examples of how we can write that though. Okay. So we have this is nice and neat and orderly. It's really easy to read. We have our open paragraph tag and our closed paragraph tag, and over again. So we have paragraph 1, 2, 3, and this is exactly what that would pump out on this page, right? Now this one, you can see we have the same thing. We have our opening P tag and our closing P tag, but they're all in the same line, right? And you have to scroll around to see the whole thing. It can be a little difficult to look at. And then we have this one where it's really the same thing as this top one here, except for somebody put a whole bunch of space in here for some reason, right? Now here's the secret. You can see on the little asterisk, you probably already noticed. White space, it's only for humans. The computer doesn't care. You can write your code with any spacing you want. The computer is going to ignore all of that white space. It's going to get rid of it, and all 3 of these would look exactly like this. So why do we care? Well, you do it for yourself. We're not as good at computers as reading things in one giant line. It gets really confusing really fast to look at something like that. So we try to organize our code in ways that make sense and that help you understand what's going on in the code. All right, a couple more elements here. We have a heading tag. Now there are 6 heading tags. We've listed them out here, and they're really self-explanatory. H1, H2, H3, H4, blah, 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 and on and on. If you've ever used, let's say, Microsoft Word or Google Docs, in fact, let's try that real quick. Let's flip over here, and we'll go doc.new. Let's go ahead and paste this in from the slides. So we got all our headings here, right? And if I highlight this, you may have used this before. I drop this little guy down here and I select heading 1, right? It's the exact same thing as what's over here. We have heading 1 through heading 6. The element just looks like this, H1. We abbreviate it. There's no reason to write out the whole word heading, right? I want you to pay attention to this, though. This is important. They indicate hierarchy, not size. So what do I mean by that? Now, are all these getting smaller as they go down? Yeah, absolutely, right? Do they need to? Not necessarily. Their order of importance, their hierarchy, which one is more important than the other? So if we go back to our Google Doc real quick here, and we go ahead and let's say we'll call this a heading 2. We'll give them the right tags here real quick. Heading 4. All right, that's good enough. If you've ever written an outline for a paper and Google Docs gives you a little preview what that outline looks like, you'll see something like this, right? So you might have your main point here and then some subpoints that all kind of live inside of each other. They're related, and that's the hierarchy of heading tags. All right. Almost there. So we got some examples of headings. We can go through kind of any website. You can look for H tags. You'll find them. They're there. They're not hard to find. They're super useful. All right, formatted text. What do I do to get my text to look a little bit different? There's a few ways to do this. We're going to start with our HTML, right? So we have a paragraph. We're going to put emphasized text, or as most people know it, italics, right? Italics. And we use an EM tag. So we can see it's a container tag. Remember, it contains things. In this case, it contains the word emphasized, right? And anything that's inside of this will be emphasized. In this case, italics. We can change that, but this is the default that all browsers will put, is italics with an EM tag. We have another one called the strong tag, which makes text stronger or bold, right? So this is one way, again, we can highlight text, we can format it a little bit, and we can make it stand out just like we need to. Now notice, this is a little important. We need to indicate meaning through style. If we want to do it just because we think it looks nice, we can use CSS for that. If we want to indicate it because it's important, or emphasized, you must have your parents sign your detention slip. You must send in your absentee ballot if you want to vote absentee. We can use one of these here to convey meaning. But again, if it's just for aesthetics, it's just for style, we don't need to worry about that. We can use CSS. So that was a lot of talking, right? Let's actually do some coding. So you'll see this type of slide here regularly throughout the course. Enough talk, let's code, right? So we're gonna go in, let's add some content to our HTML about a topic of your choosing. It doesn't matter what, anything at all. Think about kind of what you want your site to be about. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be anything profound, but it really helps to have sort of, hey, I'm gonna write about basketball or Destiny 2 or whatever it is, right? So you don't spend a whole bunch of time thinking about what you want to say and what pictures you want to get all over the place. We want to focus on the coding. So pick a topic, choose that, and let's roll with it. So here's kind of your, let's say, homework in between videos. I want you to add one of each level of heading, 1 or 2 short paragraphs of text below each heading. Okay, so remember we had 6 heading tags, and we just want 2 p tags below them. Let's use some strong and some EM tags within a few paragraphs just to try them out and emphasize some things.